Being aware of my surroundings has really helped me understand life. Regardless of how dark it gets, there will always be a day that will bring light and inspiration. This is something that constantly reminds me that I am not part of the dark. Like I was just saying in this video, right, that I just made, that I need to be aware of my surroundings. I need to be aware, like, regardless of how people, regardless of how hostile the environment becomes, I need to take into consideration that, how would you say it, that I'm not part of it. Like, Mexico has changed, because when I first got to Mexico, there was guns everywhere. There was guns everywhere. There was police with guns, and like the police, that for the most part, like when, like, a certain amount of years before I got deported in Mexico, they would carry guns, but they would carry them in their hoister. And then there were some police officers that they didn't have guns. You know what I'm saying? You would go to some places, or in some cities, the police officers didn't have any guns, you know? And so, little by little, like, things have changed, because as soon as I got deported, like, everybody had guns. The city cops had, like, AK-47s. The state, the how would you say it? The federals are more clean about it. They're like more clean and shaved, and they always remain in their federal cars, and for the most part, they have handguns, and they're always on the highways. They were always on the highways, but the city cops and the state cops had AK-47, had assault rifles, and the military had the same thing, assault rifles, and what do you call it? And, like, it was a very hostile environment. There was guns everywhere, you know. But I tell myself, over the time, and then there was, like, these cars with that were unmarked, and that, you would see them in the stores, in the freaking and small restaurants, buying food, eating, and, what I'm saying, with guns, with guns, and they were hitmen, out and about, and they had assault rifles, and what do you call it? And that, over the years, has started to disappear. It has started to dis diminish. Little by little, it has decreased. And you don't see that anymore. You don't see that anymore. Like, you don't even hear about how people are killing each other. Like, when I grew up, people would kill each other often. You know, and, like, I don't hear about it nowadays. Like, the people that are here, like, you don't like you don't eventually hear, that neighbor that was over there, yeah, they killed him, or that neighbor got run over, or that neighbor, crashed in a car crash, or that, you don't hear that. And in the States, when I grew up, people would die often. They would die often, and I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening, that, uh, uh, I feel that the violence has decreased, that death, constant death, has decreased. And, like, and I think that it has a lot to do with me being aware of my surroundings, that, what, if it does not affect me, if there's people with guns, if there's this and if there's that, you could just ignore it. It's hard to ignore, because, like, this is Mexico. It's hard to ignore, but over the time, I mean, I've I've adjusted, I went from being extremely scared to being like, wow, man, you go to the store and there's freaking 7, 8, or more cops, or soldiers with assault rifles. You know, I guess at one point I had got used to it, you know, and you just don't pay attention to it, and you just don't pay attention to it, and slowly but slowly it starts to disappear, you know, and it's very, like, how would you say it? I guess it's comforting to see that violence has decreased. That violence has decreased. But that's what I wanted to say, that it's being aware of your surroundings. That regardless of if they're there, regardless if they're there, like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You could, say to yourself, you know what, that doesn't affect me. You know what? I'm not part of that. You know what? That is gonna soon disappear. And so it's very interesting. It's very interesting to see how, like, just by paying attention to what is actually there, by highlighting, what is actually, around you, by being aware of your surroundings and saying, you know what, this is there. This is there. You know, there's people with guns, or there's people that pray to the devil, or there's, how would you say it? There's this, there's drunks, there's drug addicts, and there's this that's there. All you have to do is ignore it. You have to be aware of it, you know, but don't let it be part of your person. You create a weekly routine, and you stick to it, and you don't let nobody affect that weekly routine whatsoever, and they start to leave. Basically, little by little, they start to leave. That's what it is. Eventually you see a house where there is a bunch of drug addicts. you know you see them there, and eventually you see the house empty. You see the house getting painted. You see it getting restored. You see it, how would you say it, something taking its place. That's the way life is. you know you know that's the way life is. And at the end of the day, these negative people, they can't do nothing about it, regardless of how much they try. you know if you're aware of what they're doing, and you highlight it, and you shine that limelight upon them, they don't like it. They flee they flee, they run for the shadows. you know and in life, in this world, regardless of how much evil says that they dominate, they can't stand in the limelight.